Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, panel, for being here. Um, I, I know that Senator Scott has taken a keen interest in this subject, and his Road to Housing Act is a great framework to offer, ideas that are going to move this conversation forward on housing. Certainly supporting innovation and reducing regulatory burdens are ways we can help Americans find affordable rental housing or move into home ownership. This year has created some particular issues that normally we don't have to deal with. We've had unprecedented amounts of snow in Wyoming, so much so that the snow load on the roofs of our housing weighs so much that whole buildings are collapsing. Not issues that you encounter everywhere, but I suspect, Ms. Smith, you know what I'm talking about. It's a unique issue to some of us who are in the Intermountain area or northern climates, but there are also uniquenesses to those areas in the south that we don't encounter. Anyway, the regional perspective has to be respected on these issues and is really important. That said, I'd like to start by asking Ms. Calder a question. Welcome to the hearing. Over the last several years, the federal government has directed a tremendous amount of money towards housing, and yet I'm hearing every day from constituents, literally every day, that they're having trouble finding affordable housing. So my question is, have you done any research about what the net effect is of spending all this money on housing and having it appear not to solve the problem?
Well, I've done a little bit of research on that. A few years back, I looked at the places that HUD spending was directed, and I found that it was directed to states that have the highest level of regulation. So in places that are restrictively zoned, in places that have restrictive land use regulations, that's where the HUD subsidies were going. And I think that that is really problematic and probably, is one reason why we have this sort of situation where we're spending, billions every year. We just recently increased to $70 billion a year annually that we're spending at HUD. And at the same time, we're not seeing reductions in the number of people that are, cost burdened or severely cost burdened. And I think that that's probably why we're sort of rewarding places that have these really restrictive zoning and land use regulations that stifle housing supply, and that directly affects housing affordability.
Well, that segues into my next question, which is another uniqueness of states in the American West. Wyoming is half federal land. Utah is 2/3 federal land. Nevada is almost 7/8 federal land. And so some of our communities are landlocked by federal land, and that has placed a unique constraint on housing. So can you talk about how we could instead use federal lands to help solve the housing problem?
Absolutely. Well, I really like the bill that you co-sponsored, the Houses Act. I believe you were a co-sponsor on that
Yes.
bill.
Yes.
I'm really a fan of that bill, and that bill would allow local governments to nominate federal lands and purchase them and use them to develop housing at a certain housing density level. There are requirements on how dense the housing needs to be. I think that that's really valuable. I think people that don't live in the West or Intermountain West, they don't realize how much of the West and Intermountain West are federal lands, and they don't realize that most of those federal lands, no, they're not national parks, they're not national monuments, they're Bureau of Land Management land, they're land that is grazing or mining or energy producing land. And that land is also close to city boundaries. It's close to city borders. There was a report that was published that looked at Utah specifically and found that 650,000 acres of BLM and Forest Service land were within a mile of Utah cities. And so this is not land that's far off and hinterlands. It is close to city boundaries, and I think it could make a difference from a housing supply perspective.
Thank you. And one quick question for Mr. Tisler, because I'm about out of time. How can manufactured housing, tiny homes, and innovations help in this space?
They're definitely, again, the tool to address the supply issue. And being able to look at zoning issues to be able to get tiny homes on properties in urban communities, suburban communities need to be addressed. I think that there's answers for either senior living, family living, intergenerational living in terms of looking at manufactured housing, ADUs, and small, tiny homes on properties. And so that should be looked at as an answer to the issue.
I like your ideas about intergenerational housing. Thank you. I yield back.